Welcome to Elevate and Thrive, Breaking Barriers for an Empowered Life. I'm your host, Jen Smith, and I am so excited to be on this journey with you. In this podcast, we are going to dive deep into the transformative stories of individuals who have faced adversity head-on, emerged stronger, wiser, and more empowered. I'm here to share those stories with you, to remind you that no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a sunrise waiting to greet you. To inspire you to break through your own barriers, rewrite your own story, and to step into the light of your true potential. So what can you expect from Elevate and Thrive? Each week, I am going to bring you stories of triumph, resilience, and empowerment. We're going to explore the depths of the human spirit, spirituality, uncovering the courage and the strength that lies in each and every one of us. But more than that, we're going to provide you with practical tools, actionable insights, and a community of like-minded individuals who are also on this journey alongside you. So whether you're facing your own challenges or simply seeking inspiration to elevate your life, know that you have come to the right place. Together, we are going to break barriers, defy expectations, and soar to new heights. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I cannot wait to see where it takes us. Remember, you are worthy, you are enough, and your journey to an empowered life starts now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode today of Elevate and Thrive, Breaking Barriers for an Empowered Life. We have an amazing guest with us today. I am so excited for her to share her story with you. She is doing amazing things. She is helping a lot of people, and she has a really powerful story to tell. Vanessa Elle Wilde is with us today, and she is an artist. She is an entrepreneur. She is a business coach. She has been through a lot to bring her to where she is, and she has used her comedy to come back to a relationship with herself. And so she's going to share a little bit of that today. Vanessa, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm awesome, Jen. Thanks for having me today. I'm so glad that we could do this.
I'm so glad that you're here with us. So I would absolutely love it if you could take us back to the beginning of your journey and tell the listeners a bit about what you've been through that led you to where you are today.
It's a loaded question, right? We all have stories, and our origin story, at least in this life, is really, I think of it as providing very rich and nutrient dense experiences that make us who we are. From my part, I grew up in the Hare Krishna movement, aka a cult. And back in the 70s, apparently, this was the consciousness. People wanted to step out of a very materialistic or capitalistic society, and they wanted to live this elevated life. So I think of my parents as like the OG hipsters, right? They were way ahead of their time, and they were onto something more elevated in how they wanted to raise a family. And so that's where I began. What's interesting about growing up in a cult, and so many people know this now, is that one of the ways in which a cult thrives is by suppressing the individual desires and expression of its adherents. And that was really what I was met with as a kid, as a very expressive, creative, kind of wild child with very talented parents who were also very creative. That kind of environment did not foster my natural essence and personality. And so that caused a lot of friction as I got older and sassier and more empowered. It became harder and harder to contain my expression and my energy. And fortunately, I was able to get out of the cult at around 11 years old. At that time, I was super rebellious and I was causing problems. And one of the things that was often talked about is how important it is to control ourselves. Well, that idea of control extended to how other people could control us. And a measure of control for young girls at that time was to marry them off to an older person. And that was the way that you would contain that energy. And so it was proposed that I marry a 29-year-old man when I was 11 years old. And you can imagine that I just said, absolutely not. And I was very empowered to say that because, again, that was my natural instinct was no way, you're not going to control me. And there's no way I'm getting married. I'm not going to live in a life of serving some guy and doing his laundry. So fortunately, my dad had stepped out of the cult and he was able to help me leave physically. Like I moved to London and I was a lot safer in that situation. Fast forward a few years, and by the time I was 16, I was kind of, again, wild, expressing myself. I ended up getting pregnant. And by the time I was 17, I was a mom. And so part of that journey was kind of making up for the sins of the parents, right? I was going to be there for my son. I was going to love him. I was going to show up every day for him and all the things that you want your parents to do for you and not to put you in a cult. So that was a very long journey. And part of that journey was interesting because I didn't focus on myself. I didn't really get to know myself as an adult. I was a mom, I was busy, I worked 9 to 5 jobs. And as you can imagine, Jen, 9 to 5 job is soul sucking. And so I felt like I was back in that confinement of a cult and just being absolutely suppressed with, again, my energy. I think at one point, an HR manager told me that my hair was too big and I was wearing too much color. So there was just this theme in my life of always being told who I was and how to dress and how to act, that everything I represented was too much, offensive, ridiculous, all the way from being in a cult to now being in a corporate environment. By the time I was 36, I really started to have these incredible meltdowns. I just would get frozen anytime something happened in my life. A job didn't work out or something was going on with my son. I just got to the point where I was completely overwhelmed and burnt out. At that time, I was also diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And so that helped make sense of a lot of the physical pain, the emotional pain. I had brain inflammation at the time. My joints hurt. I had neuropathy. I was in moments felt like I was losing my sight, my hearing. And so I really was scared. And I thought, well, if I'm going to die, then I may as well do something I've always wanted to do, which was go to acting school and become an actress. Well, in San Diego, that really didn't feel like opportunities were there. So someone invited me to an improv class. Have you ever taken an improv class?
I have not. I have not.
So improv completely and utterly changed my life. And when I say improv, I'm not talking about stand-up comedy. I'm really just talking about the games and activities used by improvisational players to both engage in short form games and also to prep for more of the long form. So it's tons of fun games and activities. A lot of them are called design failure games. And the idea is that you're not getting anything right. You're actually designed to screw this up. And it's in that moment of screwing it up, forgetting what you're supposed to do, misfiring the direction you're guiding the game in. Everybody comes together and they cheer for you and they're hysterical laughing. And that was the first time since being a kid, since 12 years old, really, where I felt this reorientation in my body, in my nervous system, a very visceral experience of joy.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
so
Go ahead. Go ahead.
now I want to hear from you because I'm talking a lot.
Oh no, this is your story. I love it. I love it. It's amazing. I was just thinking about how maybe all of us need an improv class
Absolutely.
because
Come to Savannah.
it sounds like such a powerful experience because you're right. I think so many of us, most of us, we're conditioned to conform to what the expectations are of other people, to follow the rules of other people that are all honestly just made up anyway. You know, the rules are all just made up based on what somebody believes to be true. And so that just sounds like such a powerful experience to be able to be supported and just also be in the moment. It sounds to me like improv really requires you to be in the moment and not in your head, and to be tapping into what comes up for you in that moment, but then to be supported by it.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It is a very supportive environment. And we have a society that's designed to judge and isolate and separate and divide. And it's just, when you come in together where you have this sort of collective effervescence, so to speak, this collective joy, it's contagious, right? Just if you're in a room full of negative people, you're going to feel that. If you're in a room full of joyous people, you're going to feel that also. What I love about improv is it's a very physical joy. It's not just a cerebral experience that stays up in your head. It's, you get goosebumps, your whole body, all your neurochemicals sort of fire up, and you've got the serotonin and the oxytocin, and you've got all these things happening in your body system. And it was the first time where I thought, God, a lot of grown-ups talk about joy, but I don't think anybody's having this experience outside of drinking or orgasms or, all the other things that we do to sort of, quote unquote, have fun or feel connected, or be playful as adults. This was revolutionary. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to change my life and everybody else's life. And I thought, if only the whole world could do improv, we would be a much safer place. Playing with people and we like each other, we're not going to be killing each other. And so that's really where that kind of veered off and took me on this continued path of getting to know myself and liking myself and trusting myself. It was through this group interaction. And so that's what ultimately led me to this concept of self-friendship, is that prior to that, I had been taught how to dislike myself, how to distrust myself, how whatever I wanted and knew inside was not real. And so this was a really interesting path towards liking and knowing and trusting myself. And this is what I call self-friendship, right?
I love it so much. There's a couple of things that stood out to me in what you just said, talking about the joy. And you were talking about that self-friendship. To me, I would say self-love. It's in that same realm as coming back to a place of connection with ourselves. And I heard you say that in those moments in that improv, when you were experiencing all of these different chemical reactions that your brain was having, it was like you were reconnecting to yourself in that moment, but also connecting to other people in that moment. And I agree. It's like when we come back to this self-friendship, this self-love, and this connection, it changes everything. And that is where the happiness and the joy comes from. Would you agree with that?
Oh, precisely. Oh, precisely. It's exactly where it comes from. And the reason I use self-friendship versus self-love is because a lot of people have a complex relationship with the word love. And it gets tied into a romantic sort of ideology. Self-friendship, most of us understand the elements of self-friendship, and it's a little bit more neutral, right? And probably a little less up and down and all over the place. So that self-friendship is spirit of playfulness. That is a spirit of really deep connection with ourselves and a really deep liking for ourselves, an appreciation for self. And so there's this lighter hearted, I'm with you, girl, this inner dialogue that happens that's like, I'm on your side, I'm your bestie. And I think that self-friendship piece is really where we're at in our society right now, right? From self-friendship, we'll grow into a deeper love with ourselves. We can grow into a more peaceful state of mind. We can grow into a more present person. And when we create that presence, that internal beauty, so to speak, that's how we'll engage with the world. And would you agree that the world is in a little bit of disarray at
Oh,
the moment?
absolutely. I would agree with that. Yeah. I love what you're saying about the playfulness too. That self-friendship term. I love that because you're right. And it does have this playful connotation to it. It's not as deep as the love part because I agree that can be a struggle for a lot of people based on our experiences, based on what we've been through in life. That can have a meaning to it that can be really hard to navigate. And so I love that term, thinking about the relationships that we have in our life, the friendships that we have. If we connect deeply, then that does become a very loving situation. And so I agree, it's all connected. The state of the world right now is lacking connection with each other. We're lacking connection with ourselves and that playfulness and who we are and that friendship with ourselves, like you're saying.
Well, and I love that you see that too, because it's one of those things that we talk about self-love and all these things in so many different ways, but what's that practical application, right? What does that actually look like in real life? And not to be too simplistic, but it starts with self-awareness and learning about yourself, getting to know yourself. And so I've spent the last year, we talked about before we jumped on, like in this cocoon mode. I'm in this adorable little cottage. It's absolutely tiny. And here I've been able to be with myself, be in my own energy, hear my thought, self-soothe the emotional part, right? If there's something going on, I'm not reaching out to a bunch of people. I'm dealing with my even the darker shadow type of stuff on my own. And that's been really, really healing. I've learned a lot about myself. And so, even in the privacy of my own mind, even in the quiet of my space, I've learned that I actually truly love myself. Very similar to how I felt about myself as a kid, but then went on this path of forgetfulness, of being talked out of that, of being told that that was not the right way to be. So I'm back at being this like, oh, I'm okay and I like me. And then it's really from this place that I say, now we can go save the world, right? Now I can contribute to a much more peaceful world. Now I know I'm going to show up genuinely. And also, I have a lot to contribute to that. So I love the quote in the Bible. Jesus talks about this concept of treating your neighbor as you do yourself. And if you look at the state of the world, that's what we're doing. We're in conflict, we're fighting, we're judging, we're in opposition, we're isolating, we're causing all these kind of problems. And maybe not you and I, right? But the more resolved and loving we are inside, the more of a friendship that we have with ourselves, the more we can actually bring that and contribute that into the world. And I say, so become your own bestie and then go save the world.
I can relate to, we talked a little bit before we started recording about being in this cocoon, and I can really relate to that. I spent about a year and a half just really coming back into myself, dealing with a lot of things that I didn't realize were still present, processing, allowing, just really sitting with myself. And it was during that time that I had these profound insights and these releases. I swear if anybody would have seen me during that time, it was like I would be fine one minute and the next thing I'm just crying for no reason. And then I start laughing because I'm crying because I'm just like, what is happening right now? But it was all necessary because it's this energy that I was carrying around with me from all of these events and all of this hard stuff that happens in life and things that I apparently didn't process, that I didn't realize were such a big part of what I was carrying around with me. And so spending that alone time and really being willing to sit with myself and honor through love and friendship, like you're saying, how can I be a friend to myself? What do I need in these moments? Was so powerful to me, and it sounds like it was really really powerful for you as well. And I also agree with what you're saying is that we can't be that for other people until we're that for ourselves. And the culture of the world right now is based on the the friction almost,
Yes.
you
Oh
know?
my God, that's such a fantastic. I love that you just said that. That was absolutely perfect because that's exactly what's happening. We're in this constant state of friction, and we know, and we know that when we're in that state internally, it's really hard to like talk to your kids or your spouse or whatever. And the world is feeding off of this concept. Have you ever seen that movie, The Fifth Element?
I have not seen that.
Oh my gosh, it's such a phenomenal movie. The concept is that the world is going to be destroyed by this negative energy. And the more angry and the more in conflict we are, the more destructive or the more this impending doom is set to be. And the fifth element is personified by this kind of sassy, wild creature and woman. And the fifth element turns out to be really love. Well, at the end of the movie, that's really what it boils down to. And love at the end of the day is what saves the world. And so that's really what I want to promote is this idea of being your own best friend, really taking the time to love yourself. I've taken the time. It sounds like you have too. And when you're in that messiness, as Brene Brown calls it, the messy middle, right? When you're in that messy, goopy time of your life where you're like regrowing yourself as a mature human, it isn't fun. And Jen, it takes so much courage. I love that you went through that with yourself and now look at you. And so this is where I love what I've been through. I love my own story because it's crazy and weird and intense and dark. I mean, I've been homeless, I've dealt with abuse, you name it, I've been there. And so how do you like yourself? How do you love yourself? How do you have your own back when you have gone through all of that? How do you not slip into that constant state of friction with yourself and rejection or the judgment of yourself? It takes courage. And ultimately, I think that's what what you had was massive courage, to get to the other side.
I totally agree with that. Oh my gosh, does it take courage? That is the perfect word to describe that because you're right. It's not easy to sit with these things. It's not easy to allow what comes up. And you're right, it's messy. We all have our own timing of what that process looks like for us. So for one person, it could be a couple of weeks of whatever, or for another person, it could be years. And whatever it is okay. I love the fact that you're talking about love is the answer too, because it really, I say this all the time in my posts on Facebook, all over, and it sounds so cliche, but it really truly is. It's like when we come back to a place of love for ourselves, and what you're saying too is it starts with that friendship. And so it might take you a minute to get to the love part, but can you be friends with yourself? Can you start with that friendship? Can you start with, what do I need right now? What's coming up for me right now? Can you do that and have the courage, like you said, to ask those questions and to be willing to listen to what comes up? Because sometimes those answers can mean making some changes in our life that feel really, really uncomfortable. And I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't do this kind of stuff, is because, okay, well, if I start to become more of a friend to myself and more loving to myself, and that means that I'm in maybe a toxic relationship, then what does that look like for my life? Is like, well, if I'm loving for myself, then that means that this situation is not a good situation for me to be in, right? And so that might mean having to leave that toxic relationship. And that is really, really, and that's just an example, but you could apply that to so many different aspects of life. So I think along with this comes the willingness and the courage, like you said, to be willing to make the changes that are necessary for you to be that friend for yourself and to have that love for yourself. And that is the messy part. That's the hard
That's the messy part.
right?
And we can do it in small ways. And I have a different approach. I went through all the heavy spiritual stuff, and I've gone through this program called Awakening Coaching, where I got into my consciousness and presence, and I've done meditation, and I'm a Reiki master, and I've my yoga certification, and I've done all the things. I've gone to therapy, extensive therapy. And I think all of that is important. And if that's how you're called to go inward and go get to know yourself, do it. But right now in this world, we got to play. So I have a different methodology for getting through some of this now. It involves pleasure. It involves being present. It involves playfulness. And I think that's the path that I have found that really pulled all these other modalities and paths together to create more of this inner peace and developing that friendship. And so really pleasure is one of those things that people are like, well, you immediately go to sex. Well, pleasure can be really being present and enjoying a fruit salad, let's say, or it can be wearing something that you feel absolutely delicious and so fun in, right? It can be all kinds of different things. that that feel really good and enjoyable. So I think of pleasure not as a luxury, but really a vital nutrient in this self friendship process. And then the playfulness, having fun with what you do. Can you have fun when you sit down and go through your money, right? Can you make that fun? Can you make it fun to do the dishes? Can you make it fun being stuck in traffic? And really starting to think about how can you bring more fun? How can you bring more pleasure into your life? When we play, we become more present because you're in that flow state. It's a natural reaction to that. So once you're more present with everything you're doing, this is where you get that peacefulness from. So I think of this whole really cool process to get you there and really to activate and cultivate that self friendship. And it doesn't have to all be serious. It doesn't all have to be heavy.
I love that. I was thinking when you were saying about the passion, can you enjoy that, whatever you're eating? And can you just enjoy the smell of the flower that you're standing next to, or just be in awe of the bee buzzing around? Like, is that possible? And I think that for a lot of people, that's really can be a hard thing. And it comes back to not being connected and not being present in the moment. And so I love that you're talking about playfulness as a way to really tap into that being in the present moment and just being where you are. I work with a lot of people that have anxiety, a lot of people that have depression. And a lot of that anxiety is worrying about what's happening in the future. Depression is being focused on the past. And so both of those ends of the spectrum, you're not present in the now. And those thoughts and those feelings that come up is because we are somewhere else. We're not in the moment.
Exactly. Well, and we're on this, which
Yes.
was reinforcing all those things. It's reinforcing this idea that God, your house could be cuter, could have a better relationship. Your kids could have cuter outfit. You should be able to know how to do all these dances, or you're not cool. And the myriad of nonsense that sometimes social media can, or that distraction of social media can impose, right? And we're very vulnerable to it, both chemically and socially. So it's hard to set that aside and come back into the moment. But yeah, playfulness I'd love to see people get to the point where they crave dancing in their kitchen versus being on their phones, right? Or they're setting up silly things that they're doing throughout the day instead of doom scrolling. It also doesn't have to be so outward. Sometimes it can just be a more inward experience that they're having of presence, creating a flow state within yourself, in your own house, with, doing something less exuberant, where you're drawing or you're coloring or you're reading. Who reads anymore? Like really legit sits there and reads a book. I was at Jacumba Hot Springs, the new hotel out in East San Diego, and I was so amazed. So the beautiful hot springs. Have you been there yet?
I have not.
It's a must if you're in San Diego. What I noticed was about 6 or 7 people had physical books with them as they were laying out in the sun. And my mind just was like, from every age. There were young couples with books. There was an older woman with a book. And I was so heartened. I was like, okay, these people, they're creating that flow state, that presence. They're enjoying the beautiful sun and these these warm waters, and they're reading. And I thought, okay, so that's one form of pleasure and a way to cultivate presence, but there's 1,000 other ways.
You just gave some wonderful examples of how people could do that. Is there anything else that you could offer as far as just maybe some tips or insights for people who might have a hard time, disconnecting from their devices and being in the moment? Do you have any other advice of how people might be able to find the courage to bring themselves back into the moment and really connect with what is?
So I believe in small steps. I think it's important to kind of hack your habits, right? I'm not a big cold turkey kind of person. I know that works for some people, but I challenge myself to sit at dinner with a friend and and maybe even leave my phone in the car or put it in my purse. I do not leave it sitting out on the table. So super uncomfortable. Get to know your body system, and your body's like, I want to check my phone. I know I have a text. Somebody important's calling me. We kind of have this visceral freak out. So challenge yourself for 5 minutes. Don't pick up your phone. At dinner, leave it in the car or put it in your purse and just don't look at it, right? Don't bring it to the bathroom to check. Believe me, I've done all these things. So there's a small step there, right? When it comes to technology, close up your phone at 9 p.m. Don't sit in the dark by yourself scrolling, because that's when your brain is in a very vulnerable state. You're tired and now you're just absorbing all kinds of nonsense. So that's one step. The other step is to find a moment where you can really engage with the natural world. And what I mean by that is your dog, your kids, a tree, the clouds, flowers, something that is connected to the earth, really, that can just allow you to focus. Stare at a flower for 5 minutes. When you look at a flower with presence and curiosity, all of a sudden it becomes the most amazing, beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. No drugs needed. I always say you can get high on a sunbeam if you pay attention. So getting really connected that way. And this can be 2 minutes, it can be 3 minutes. Doesn't matter. And don't take your phone to go take pictures of everything, because that's kind of taking you out of the connection, right? So, really looking at just small things. Get off your phone for 5 minutes. Don't pay attention to it while you're at dinner. Look at natural beauty and engage with that for a few minutes a day. 5 minutes is all it takes. Sit with your dog and get to know their breathing pattern, feel their fur. When you get really present with something, it amplifies that experience. And that becomes what you end up craving and wanting. And that feels really, really fulfilling, versus this ache after you put your phone down where you're like, I need more, or I feel terrible about myself, right? Also, food. I mean, food is pleasure, but we just scarf it down. One of my favorite exercises was from John Kabat-Zinn's. I did his mindfulness training years ago, and you got really present with a raisin. And this sounds kind of funny, but you put the raisin in your mouth and you swirl it around, and you're kind of in this room with all these other people doing this, and you're tasting it and you're feeling the texture. And all of a sudden, you're like, what the heck is in my mouth? You get this like, wait, what is this? And you either love it or hate it genuinely, because you're finally present with the experience, and it's a completely different thing than just popping a raisin in your mouth. And so just give yourself some space. I'd say 5 minutes a day to cultivate presence. And that can really go a long way towards creating that state of mind where you're more peaceful, you feel more calm, the anxiety goes down, you're not in the present, or I'm sorry, you're not in the future getting anxious, and you're not in the past anymore. You're in the moment where there are no problems, there are no issues, there are no anxieties in this very moment. And that can be unbelievably liberating.
Those are amazing tips. Thank you so much. So interesting. You talked about the raisin. I have recently been playing around with intermittent fasting, and I did a course around it, actually. I love to learn. And so I'm all about training and learning and understanding the nuts and bolts of why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And that was actually an exercise that he had us do, was to take a small piece of chocolate. And the exercise was to take a piece of chocolate, like to get two different kinds of chocolate. So one of them was just like one that you absolutely love. So it's like your favorite kind of chocolate. And then get a kind of chocolate that's just okay. It's just kind of mediocre, but it's okay. The exercise was to eat the one that you love just as you would normally eat. So just kind of, normal. And then the mediocre one, or the just okay one, exactly like what you said with the raisin, where put it on your lips and you just hold it there and you notice how it feels on your lips. You put it in your mouth and you just let it sit on your tongue and feel how it feels on the roof of your mouth. So then after you do this little exercise, to really, after you're done with that second experience where you're really present with whatever that is that you put in your mouth and really paying attention, what is the taste? What are the thoughts that are coming up around it? To think about which experience was more pleasurable for you. And it was really interesting because every single person that did the chocolate experiment thought that the mediocre chocolate was the best experience. And so it really came down to being present. And so for me personally, this is something that I've been trying to practice in my life. As a business owner, as an entrepreneur, sometimes we get in a hurry. We have a lot to do. We are trying to accomplish and we're trying to do all the things. It can be very easy to forget how important it is to be in the moment. And so I love what you said about the baby steps, because what is one small thing that you can do to practice and just practice creating that awareness of that present moment? One of the things that I've been practicing is really sitting with food that's on my plate, putting it on an actual plate, not eating it out of a container, but actually sitting there with my plate of food without distractions. So no phone, no computer, just sitting there and really paying attention to the temperature of my food, texture, all of these things. And it's just absolutely amazing because what I'm finding is I'm eating less of what's on my plate because I'm more present, but also I'm just really appreciating my food more. And so it goes back to that cultivating that present moment awareness, and then the appreciation and the love that comes from that, and the gratitude that you feel and notice from being in that presence.
No, I love that. And there's so many different ways that you can call yourself into presence, right? There's that deep reflective state and the experiential state of eating that chocolate and really for yourself knowing that. When you have that experience where your body knows something different, that's really where you can make a long-lasting change. And so I encourage people to, whether it's through play or calling, I mean, play, I think, is an act of presence, right? So if we boiled all of this down as get present with your life and your moments and everything, however you do it. But I love that you had that experience, right? And so now you know the value of that. And look, you're already changing one of the habits that you have in your life. You're eating differently, you're eating, and that's going to inspire you to eat different foods. And it inspires that deeper self-knowledge too. There may be things that you've been eating that you just eat, and now you're like, I don't actually like that. That's not actually good for me. So awareness and presence fosters knowledge, self-knowledge. And the more you know yourself and the more you care for yourself, the deeper and richer that love becomes. And it becomes practical. Who you hang out with, what you eat, what you wear, where you live, how you do you. And ultimately, isn't that what friendship is about? We get to know each other. We hang out, we spend time together, we accept each other. And so, this whole concept of self friendship is encompassing all of this so that we get to the place where we really, like I said, know and trust ourselves. And that will make every experience richer and more fruitful for as long as we get to be on this spinning ball of dirt.
Totally agree. One of the things that you shared with me before we started recording is that you have been working on a really, really amazing project. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I would love to. Thank you. So, yes, so in all of my experiences, I really wanted to create this product that can really help people as a way of reflection and expression. So, going along with my name, Wild, I created a line of WildeCards. The first edition are they're based on the symbology of fruit. Now we think of stars and crystals and angels as our guides, but I'm a little bit more earth-based. And I think fruit is some of the most magical, delicious symbology that we get to play with. So this really stems from the concept that, like a lemon tree or like a lemon, we are seeded with a blueprint for greatness. A lemon, tiny little seed, can grow into almost 600 lemons per year. And then what do you do with those lemons? There's pies and soaps and ice creams and face wash and essential oils and all the things. And so I think that of ourselves as sort of this within us lives this beautiful seed of these ideas and visions and possibilities. And when we cultivate ourselves and nurture ourselves and look at the ingredients or experiences of our lives as nutrients, then we can really nourish our potential and this blueprint that we are actually designed for. So these cards are all different fruits representing different issues and things that we deal with in our lives, from conflict to friendship to passion to creativity. And they're designed for you to play with. Just like you would, there's a lot of affirmation cards out there and reflection cards. So it's the same kind of concept where you're looking at the art, you're looking at the write up and the card message, you can reflect on it. In the cards, there's a way to cultivate that spirit of that fruit. So some of them are playful, some of them are more reflective. There's an invocation to invoke the spirit of fruit in each card. So they're really just there for you to shuffle, to play with, to foster getting to know yourself, and hopefully at the end of the day, really loving yourself and having this very vibrant, fruitful friendship.
I love that so much. And I love that you're tapping into your creativity and what feels good to you and then putting that out in the world. I think that that is what it's all about. Sharing our gifts and what makes us happy and the love with the world. And I truly feel that these cards are going to make a difference in people's lives. It sounds amazing. When does the first series come out?
Yeah, so great question. So I'm going to be doing a digital launch at the end of this month. So it'll be for some of the cards, so you can do a digital download. And then the physical product will start to ship around September. So the website, we are wildcards.com is the website. So folks can just sign up to get on the wait list to get notified when the actual launch happens. The pre-sale for the digital downloads will be up very soon. There'll be other cards that come out as well. There's about 5 other decks that will be coming out all around these concepts of playfulness and presence, pleasure, and this inner peace that we're all searching for. So
It's so important. Reflecting on everything that you've been through, your journey, all the things that have brought you to where you are, what sort of a legacy or an impact would you like to leave behind? And how do you envision your story and these cards possibly, but all the things that you want to do in life? How do you envision that impacting the world in a positive way?
I could have gone down the path of self-destruction very easily. I had enough reasons to hate myself, to tear myself apart and hurt the world around me. I absolutely know that the world we live in is a reflection of that amplified in so many people. If there was one mission that I have in life, it is genuinely world peace, but it's through the inner verse, right? Rather than the externalization of services and products and blah, 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 blah. We have tons of tools to work with, but the frontier that we have not fully explored is the innerverse, is our consciousness as our heart and in how we process what's happening on the outside. The legacy is that it's 100% possible to live and be in a world that is peaceful and allows all folks to thrive through the inner work. And we can get to that inner work in a bunch of different ways. But until we make peace with who we are on the inside, it's really hard to do that on the outside. As within, so without, as above, so below. We hear these things constantly. It doesn't mean we all have to become these guru type of people, or you have to be a vegan, or you have to be a yogi. Nothing to do with any of that. That's still an external experience. But when the internal experience is peaceful, everything on the outside will shift. And so I really would love to leave the world with an affirmative and practical application of how you do that. And hopefully one day, we all come to a state where we are more loving towards ourselves and we are living in a state of peace within ourselves and get to experience that outside. And when we're friends with ourselves and we know how to have friendships with other people, we're a lot less likely to kill each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. That is a beautiful, beautiful legacy to leave behind. I think it is a important one. I think the world needs that right now. It needs more people doing this inner work, connecting with that inner self, like you said, and having the courage to do it. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your story and your insight and your wisdom with the listeners. And thank you for being you. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Jen. Thank you so much, and for everything you shared. It's been an honor to be here with you today. And yeah, I hope listeners have a good time with us, with our conversations today, and take away some real practical ways to implement this concept of self friendship.
I think they will. Thank you, Vanessa.